Okay, so when do you want to record?
Go now. It's running.
All right. Oh, okay, excellent. All right, everybody, welcome. I am Nick Spero, and I am on the line here with Brendon OConnell. This is the first time that me myself have ever done a video recording type of interview, so this should be fun. We're going to get a lot of the bugs out of the system on future shows. Brendon OConnell and I, Nick Spero, intend on doing future shows together. And the work that Brendon has been doing and the work that I had done on Renegade Broadcasting, as well as years prior, I started doing radio podcasting back in 2008. I actually initiated a podcast called Black Sheep Radio, and my co host was Jonathan Azaziah. Him and I go way back. And we're going to get into what's going on with him. We're going to get into Brendon's high court case, what's been going on recently, and kind of get you up to date on Brendon's status and what we can do to help Brendon as far as contacting the different administration officials over in, I believe, Perth or wherever it is that we need to. Brendon will direct any type of information that we need to know in order to contact these officials. We're going to talk about the need for more street activism. We're going to talk about the Russian angle with Rosneft and Gazprom. I was recently looking into Rosneft, and Brendon is on top of the Gazprom deals going on and the so-called sanctions on Iran or Russia. I apologize. We're also going to talk about Iran. Brendon just uploaded a recent video that we are going to discuss and kind of break down a little bit for you. You all had the opportunity to watch that before our show today, so we're just going to kind of summarize what that video is all about. So, like I said, I'm Nick Spero. I was a recent host on Renegade Broadcasting, and I got to thinking after interviewing Brendon, we didn't talk right after that. I was actually trolling Brendon for a while about the Unit 8200 after I looked more into the Talpiot program, and I think that is an excellent angle to tackle when it comes to Israeli high technology. I've been covering that even before I knew Brendon, and that's why this team that we're putting together here makes perfect sense because we're able to channel the information into the directions that it should go in a constructive way. So, Brendon, it's good to actually be on the line with you. This is a time that we should have been doing this earlier, but we're here now. We've been talking and going over a lot of different things. So, let's have you start off with your case in Australia, your status. Let's get into that real quick, and then we'll go into the other areas of conversation I brought up.
Hey Nick, so we've ironed out a few bugs, but I think there's many bugs to go. Um, the current situation. Let me address my behaviour at first. I think people need to know that I'm smiling, and I have I was always getting in trouble at school for smiling. I get in trouble, I smile. I'm about to die, I smile. Uh, I'm in. How can I say this? How can I say I'm okay, but I'm in dire straits? I'm swimming. There's sharks. I can't juggle. There's only very limited things I can do. I'm under a lot of pressure. Finances are always a worry. Not just getting enough finances, where I've managed quite well so far. It's the fact that the Australian government at any time could end any access to any money. So I've just got about 50,000 different things on my mind. I also find people constantly trying to divert me. I have to constantly repeat myself. I'm constantly getting inundated with garbage. I'm constantly finding people referring to my work and then talking about the white race ruling the world and trying to, in my opinion, associate my work with raving lunatics, trying to associate the case with raving lunatics. And I'm also having trouble articulating the case in general. The matter at the moment is my highest priority is not these videos, although I would love to do a show. My aim is the High Court. For me, the High Court of Australia is the pinnacle right now, whereby the matters of the case, including the interference of the Israeli state, which included the Israeli ambassador, Yuval Rotem, the Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister, Danny Ayalon, the Australian Foreign Minister, Stephen Smith, 35 local and federal members of parliament turned up for the Friends of Israel rally where they all attended, and 135 issued written statements of support. 2,000 people, 3,000 people attended, which would be the equivalent of 40,000 attending a similar function in California, which goes all the way back to 2005 and my work on the Collins class submarine and the procurement process for high technology contracts in Australia, and how they're all Israeli, they're backdoored, and the high technology sector that Israel is dominating right now. Now, this is such a huge matter. I'm the only person, there we go, it's doing it again. Sorry. Sorry about that, people. It keeps flicking back. I don't know why it won't stay full screen. But the matter, of course, I'm the only person on criminal charges to do with that high-profile case of offending Stanley Keyser and comments on a blog which were literally nothing, which is why the Jewish community then said he's threatened acts of violence and so on, which was all garbage. But the point was it was a very high-profile case. I got a lot of material on the record. I didn't do it perfectly. I was under extreme attack from every angle. My friends were under attack. There was a whole 18-month lead-up of intense harassment. So with that in mind, you'd think a lot of people would be, the revisionist movement aren't interested. I've written, as far as I'm concerned, the defining synopsis of the whole legislation to do with race hate. My case is the perfect case to push it forward. Revisionists don't even mention my name. We clearly have a angle of attack which we've discussed in terms of tactics, which is obviously correct. And trying to get people interested seems almost impossible, so I guess we'll have to do it ourselves. But my main priority, hopefully we can continue to do these videos, but my main priority is survival and getting my case into the High Court. Now, I just had an interview with lawyer, an instructing solicitor who is absolutely dead keen to go ahead. However, he's not fully briefed on the matter, even though I've supplied all the paperwork. He should be very soon. But he has expressed fear. He says, I'm quite fearful for my safety. That's a quote from Kevin Foley, instructing solicitor. I've been repeatedly asked again not to mention the Queen's Counsel, the high-level barrister or lawyer who will do the actual High Court appeal. He has said blatantly, I will do it for nothing. Quote. His words were, we can start with nothing. We'll worry about the money later. Now, the point is, this is ready to go. We're just in the final negotiations. It's been painful. It's been horrendous. It's been driving me insane. I'm trying to garner that this is so big. There's one thing for me to rant online. It's another to have High Court appeals barristers in the highest court of the land, mixing in certain circles that include the managerial class of this country and the United Kingdom and the United States. Okay, this is going to the highest levels. This is big. It's going to be put on paperwork, which means the Israeli state is going to be very busy. And I am trying to force the Department of Foreign Affairs via Jewlie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, the equivalent of the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, to publicly rebuke the Israeli state for interfering in my trial and interfering. It's the largest criminal contempt of court case and international incident in Australia's history. And you'd never know about it. There's no mainstream media interest. They refuse to name me. No one will talk about me. I've had replies from New Zealand politicians, heads of intelligence community. I've had ministers contact me, Joe Francis, and talk about my safety and how Minister Francis is scared for his own safety in Western Australia. That's Minister Joe Francis, and of course the Inspector of Counterterrorism, Barry Shelton, stating, we all respect your work to do with the Israeli high technology contracts, the military contracts, and their domination of all key infrastructure throughout the world. So with that in mind, I hope in that short, brief opinion, which many people have heard 100 times before, people will put any personal don't like me ahead and realize that I will criticize you if you are incapable of understanding these simple tactics and this simple approach. That it is, number one, the twin pillars of approach, the exposing of Israel as a racist apartheid state with its foundation in Jewish, racial and religious supremacism, including Orthodox Judaism and the books of the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Zohar, or Jewish mysticism. We can also include in there as well the Old Testament, which they quote from. That has a context as a Christian. That book has a context with me, but it's extremely dangerous as well because of the repeated request to slaughter all men, women and children, which the IDF rabbis tell the troops to do as they go into battle. This is how religion, even if you're supposedly a secular Jew or a secular state, is infecting all levels of their society. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is The Israeli high technology contracts and their domination of all databases, their companies run under Israeli military intelligence, done under the Telpiot program from the 1970s on, and how they have now infiltrated completely the world's high technology sector, completely, and they are stealing all the American high technology out of DARPA via their SANM network, via their companies, via Michael Chertoff, dual national Israeli American citizen, and Homeland Security, and his private contractor spying on Americans. Then we have Rabbi Dov Zakheim and his former 2IC position at Booz Allen Hamilton, again subcontracting to the NSA. These are dual national Israeli American citizens, and many of them are either crypto Jewish or in fact American Jews who have served in the Israeli Defense Force, either done the Telpiot program itself, which is a very big program. They usually start their own companies, and then you have the normal run-of-the-mill Israeli military intelligence and lower level staff that do 3-year courses in electronic data intercept programs, and they are now running around the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia and America, running around with their hacking techniques, and they're now working in your corporations. They're working in stealing your proprietary corporate knowledge, your various well, what do you call them? See my brain. What do you call it when you have a protection for your
Oh,
knowledge?
patent.
Patents. They're stealing your patent technology, and they're opening up networks of corporations. They're literally weakening networks in your IT department in corporate and military sectors and government sectors to the Israeli state. This is so big, it is the largest, let's call it what it is. Israel is a Talmudic Jewish Bolshevik state founded by the same people who founded the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik Revolution, and they've done the same thing in the United States. You are totally infiltrated, and they are seeking the destruction of the United States and emptying out American manufacturing to China and India, and basically installing the high technology, the ability to have an administrative center in Israel to run the whole show. That's what they're doing, and that to me is the twin pillars which we have agreed we must go after. There you go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Unit 8200 is a concept that came from Talpiot per se. I know that after listening to an actual, they did a PowerPoint presentation, this company called Our Crowd, which one of the founders actually came out of Unit 8200. And what they are is a venture capitalist company that recruits or invests into these tech startup companies. And the Our Crowd team did this PowerPoint presentation, and they talked about how a lot of this information started coming out more frequently about Unit 8200 because they wanted to utilize their prestige and the snazz and the flashiness of, or just to attract Israelis to go through the IDF, and the goal, the icing on the cake would be if you got accepted into Unit 8200, where prior several, ever since the early 50s, when Unit 8200 was in operation and with American funding of technology to get them started, a lot of this information was hidden from the public. This was a very secretive group, the Unit 8200, and they're at the highest levels of the IDF except for the Air Force. The Air Force has top priority. Unit 8200 covers all other angles of signal technology and the intelligence that they gather from spying, hacking, planting information. They're an arm of the Mossad per se with the type of operations that they conduct. So they go into a lot of details. So I do recommend people listen to the Our Crowd PowerPoint presentation that I have uploaded on my YouTube channel. And I also grabbed the video from Hamza Green, who's another good YouTuber who puts out some really good information. And I grabbed one of his videos about Unit 8200, which was a lot of different clips from a documentary that was produced. I think at Vision TV, they produced a documentary on Unit 8200. So they're putting out a lot of marketing to promote Unit 8200, not only for Israelis to want to reach that level of the Israeli Defense Force, but it's also attracting other countries to want to do business with Unit 8200 founded tech companies too. So the secretiveness, they're out of the dark now. And this is something that people should really be focusing in on. And I know that a lot of people have been drawn to Brendon's work on the Talpiot program. So there's another organization that people should look into, and that is Team 8. Team 8 was founded by the former general, top-level commander of Unit 8200. And Team 8 has clients like Intel, AT&T, and all your other major telecommunications companies. They are the syndicate behind a lot of these different major multinational corporations involved in the telecom industry. So, Brendon, what do you have to say about what Team 8 and our crowd and these other venture capitalists that are investing into these startup companies? And another point to make is that if you're a graduate of Unit or an alumni of Unit 8200, our crowd will then give you first dibs as far as interviewing you, as far as whether or not they want to invest into your startup company. So no matter what, you're getting an interview, you're getting a sit-down discussion if you're an alumni of Unit 8200. So they do take care of their own, and they're promoting within.
Oh, they sound like the Truth Movement. They take care of their own. No, that was a joke, everyone.
So, yeah.
Look, isn't it funny? When I first went into this, I found that 2000. I'd already heard about it around 2004, 2005. I hadn't heard the word Talpiot at that point. In fact, I can take some credit, not entirely credit, for really promoting that. But Rad Group, which is one of the most important companies that came out of that program, Zohar Zisapel, we must understand his central role. They removed every single website reference, bar one, which was under the control of the BDS movement and a Palestinian organization. They removed every single reference to him and his work completely off the internet, every photo, every image. I had saved those web pages and I had put them into a 2010 hearing, a hearing for the court before my trial. When I did that, everything disappeared. Now it's like, instead of lights on, rats out, it's like lights on, rats in, because the rats are actually saying, no, here I am, nothing to see here. If we remember HARP, the High Altitude Aurora Research Project, one of the most intriguing and amazing things I think on the planet right now, where in Alaska they are, and in other places, they are firing microwave radiation into the ionosphere, creating all sorts of effects, including weather modification. When they initially put that in the late 70s, early 80s, they had a deadly force will be in use. When that just made more people come down to see what was going on, they took all those signs down and began public tours of the facilities, if to say, oh yeah, we fire some, it's nothing to see, have a nice day. This is what we're finding now with these words, Talpiot, Technion, Unit 8200, Team 8. What they're finding now is they're completely coming out in the open as if to say, nothing to see here. Soon we'll see movies and documentaries. There's already documentaries online as we speak on YouTube detailing some of this. We'll see it put into popular culture, even songs, even movies. There'll be a hero in the next James Bond movie. He'll be an Israeli who trained up under Talpiot. Oh yes, I'm in Unit 8200. And they'll introduce these concepts into the popular culture and they'll just be normal. And they'll say, well, who are you? Some crazy dude over there, some guy called Nick. This is out in the open. There's nothing to see here. But they're trying to normalize what is clearly in your face. They love putting things directly in front of you. And with these organizations now, their level of infiltration is so deep and so great that the only way, and I agree with the video that Ken O'Keefe said, which he took down. Ken O'Keefe has taken it down, where he said, we need the US military to remove this parasite. We need a criminal investigation with the American military's full involvement to remove this parasite from deep within the American body politic and deep within the entire intelligence community and armed forces. If I cannot see any other way to do it, and that's the role of this video.
Yep, absolutely. So we touched on your case. What can people do in order to support you as far as you've made suggestions in the past? Is there anything that needs to be repeated to where maybe some people will actually take the initiative to take action?
Look, people, I've blurted out 1,000 times I need to write letters to the foreign ministry, to write emails, very well written, simple emails. And so little has been done. We've tried started online campaigns, which was very good. A few of the people, Jinxie were tweeting for me. There was a few people twittering around. They've found their accounts are locked now. There's a lot of people I don't think there's a lot that can be done now. Other if you can donate. Have about $1,000, but I have to go somewhere. I'm not sure where to go yet, so I have that to sort out after this video. I'm probably going to apply for political asylum in Malaysia. I just don't think I have a choice as far as safe places to go. Malaysia's it, and I will have to bend to their will, whatever, because they have obviously worries too. They have to maintain their economy. They have to maintain law and order. They can come under a lot of pressure economically. They've had 2 aircraft disappear. They've held 9/11 conferences. They're very outspoken on Israel, done a lot of work for the Palestinians. So ideologically we're aligned, but we have to be realistic and pragmatic about how the world really works at their level. And at their level, it's a whole new ball game rather than us running around the internet with our YouTube channels. So that's where I'm at the moment. There is, once we're officially engaged in the High Court, what I'm worried about is that it's going to be delayed, because their favourite word is, as people have said to me, Brendon, it's delay, isolate, criminalise, and demoralise. That's their motto. Isolate, delay, criminalise, demoralise. And that's what they're trying to do to me, because I know once lawyers are engaged and the Foreign Office can state, oh, well, we can't make comment on this. This is before the courts, which they've been saying for 3 years when there is no such case before the courts. What they're trying to do is delay after all and I will release publicly my phone calls and all my emails to DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I even rang them and said, if you don't start acknowledging my existence, I'm going to have to land at Sydney Airport and stab someone in the eye with a sharp pencil. That now makes me a terrorist, of course. But finally got their attention, and they actually rang me here from DFAT in Malaysia and said, are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. We were concerned for your welfare. I said, well, you should be. I'm mentally ill. You are driving me to the point of insanity. They said, look, there's places you can go to talk to people. And I said, look, what I need is a political outcome. They've known about my case for 3 years. It was a very nice lady. The calls were recorded. What they're trying to do is delay, wait for the lawyers to have an official engagement letter, and then they can say, oh, Brendon OConnell, we can't possibly make comment about the Israeli state interfering in your trial previously, and we can't possibly give you any indication that we will rebuke the Israeli state. These things are handled quietly. But I've now had the instructing solicitor, Kevin Foley, state to me on camera, which with his permission it was recorded, the Skype call, say, I fear for my safety, Brendon, with regards to this, and I'm sure Mr. Morris will too. That's the Queen's Counsel, Senior Counsel. That will ultimately, God willing, who's expressed a strong desire to be involved in this case, and they won't be got at. It's vital that there is a public rebuking of the Israeli state, and that's what they're trying to avoid, of course. Now that's where we're at. It's a very pivotal point. If you can donate, fine. I have about $1,000, which in the grand scheme of things is nothing. And at the moment my accounts appear to be delayed, but that's okay. No one's ever had money disappear out of the PayPal. If it's refundable, it's been refunded. But people understand my precarious position. If I lose my card or they cancel my account, I'm toast. I can't get money, and most people won't do Western Union. Also, really, it's raising the public profile. It's people who have IT knowledge utilizing software like mass mail-out software like MailMerge, which you can attach to the email client Thunderbird, and you can avoid spam servers. It will send an individual email to relevant media outlets, relevant members of Parliament or Congress or Senate. I would love to see, in fact, I have a little PDF document that you could use to take around to your recruiting stations. And again, I have to do videos on this. You can take to the United States Marine Corps recruiting station. You can talk to your family members who are in the armed forces or in the NSA or CIA or any government position and say, have you heard about this case? The Israeli state came out against this guy. That's how you get your attention. You say the Israeli ambassador and deputy foreign minister came out against this one guy in Australia, and they vilified him. They locked him up for 3 years. No one's heard about him because he highlighted the Israeli state's penetration of the high technology sector and thieving material out of the United States to on-sell to America's enemies, China and Russia. Now, if you just get a little spiel happening, you'll create enormous waves. And a former Australian Defence Force soldier has already done that. He's gone around to the Australian Federal Police. He's gone to his commanding officer, which I've seen the email, and is highlighting this material. Now, these are the things that have to happen rather than another Facebook page or another YouTube channel, is people physically take material and educate themselves about this issue to the point where they can give a short spiel, like if you're a phone someone's selling, if you're into advertising and marketing, you can market this knowledge to specific managerial class within the armed forces, intelligence community, and government departments, intellectuals at universities, or you can go down to protests or go to the Republican Party. Again, Robert Morrow, the guy who wrote the book The Clintons' War on Women, with Roger Stone, who has nothing to do with them and despises Trump, and has outed a lot of Republican and Democrat sexual deviates. You'll know who Robert Morrow is. Well, I've been in touch with him. He's looked at my work, and he is moving that material through his contacts within the Republican Party in Travis County, Texas. So there are many, many potentially wonderful things to happen if I can just get a firm foundation and feel a little more support, and also get these big players who are ostensibly very cunningly avoiding mentioning what we're mentioning, and that is Talpiot, Unit 8200, and Israel's role in basically raping the United States high technology sector, and they are not saying a damn word. And people have said, you are burning bridges. Well, you know what, I'll put a suitcase nuke on them if it comes to that, because very soon, I'd say in the next 6 months, Nick, we're going to find that those major players are going to start to be called out in a very major way if they don't begin this process.
I agree. I agree. Now, do you have a compilation of all of the different email addresses that people can actually do this mail merge type of operation to contact people?
I do. Some are out of date, though. They've already started. Before you could download lists, in Australia at least, you could download a list. I've focused mainly on Australia and New Zealand. But this is a task for someone. If you really want to help, here's something very boring. It's not very sexy. Get a compilation of European, UK, Australia, and American, it would be run into the thousands, media and political and universities that are relevant to this subject roughly, but certainly all congressmen, all senators, and all MPs in the UK, Europe and Australia. That would be a very powerful collection, because we have the relevant software where we could make up an article with an attached very simple PDF to get their attention and start spamming in an intelligent way the people we need to target, which is that managerial class.
I agree. I used to use Constant Contacts, a similar program to what you're talking about, for email marketing campaigns in the electrical and lighting industry that I've been in for quite a while. And it actually does exactly as you speak. All you just have to do is feed it with all the different email addresses. It'll save it in the program, and you can do this again and keep repeating this process and continuously contact these people. If you get no response, then it's up to you to do your own due diligence to continue this process until you get a response.
And if you do them right, if you take the time, if someone takes that time, it'll take a while. You can use the software. It will actually, if you have a database of names, it will get that. You'll do your template, and it will put their name and their address even, and make it very personal. I've had a lot of success with mail merge. They had me so bound with that 2-year bail condition, I couldn't go public. But when I used mail merge, I got past all the spam servers, and I was sending out maybe 800 emails whenever I needed to make something known, and that changed the whole dynamics of my situation. So if someone can do that, who really knows how to use the specific software, that would be fantastic.
All it takes is multiple people doing something and trying to obtain the same goal. I used to work at a company called Edie's Ice Cream, and they were having a hard time getting their product into a certain grocery store. So what they did is they had family members of the company start repeatedly calling this chain of grocery stores so that they would eventually start carrying the Edie's ice cream. So they didn't even, they acted like they were regular customers for this particular grocery store. So in a nutshell, what ended up happening is that the grocery store chain actually ended up carrying the ice cream brand. So Brendon, with your case, we might have to actually do something for another individual that you brought up in your interview, or not interview, but your video upload. Jonathan Azaziah has B'nai B'rith Canada on his ass now for his most recent music album, and a lot of or not a lot, but some of the things that were said kind of triggered the Jewish community, the Jewish mafia over in Canada, the Bronfman mafia crime family, still runs Canada. And so he's fighting a hate crime, possibly. The hate crimes unit from Montreal Police have been contacted by B'nai B'rith Canada. We also know that Tony Hall has had issues with B'nai B'rith Canada, and we also know that Kevin Barrett has had issues with B'nai B'rith Canada. So it seems to be a repeating theme when it comes to Canada. What do you think about living in Canada? Probably not the best place, huh?
I was about to say, of course, that was probably not a good idea, but I just thought, you know what? Someone should contact me because I'll tell you how you can use a court case to absolutely. In fact, it's a defense. If you start saying, sure, I'll go to court and I'm going to highlight Brendon OConnell's case, I'm going to highlight Israeli intelligence activity, I'm going to use the term a lawful excuse, I'm going to use the term my personal lawful interests, I'm going to use the term public interest. See, the key with that legislation, which people might want to, one day ask me about, I don't know if someone's going to ask me about it one day maybe, is intent. So they have to prove a form of intent. Now that means state of mind is it, and I'm telling you, I am the expert on this legislation. I spent 3 years in jail doing nothing but reading. One thing jails have is a very good library. And I read non-stop, and I had people, Graham was sending me in excellent stuff, Hansard debates, all the background, the philosophical application of the law, which is worldwide. They are planning this worldwide. So with that in mind, you could use the case. Not only has Jonathan himself just got some great free advertising for his album, if he was to say, I'm going to stand and fight, because I think they might be trying to run him out of the country, maybe then arrest him, or if Tony Hall, if Dr. Kevin Barrett wished to ask me, I say we instigate a court case, which is what I did. That's what I did. Operation Get Arrested. And I went to get all this stuff on the record. I've done all the hard work. I know exactly the legislation, how it's applied in different countries, and the actual arguments in court they'll use. What they're going to do is they're going to try and rate your added on evidence as to your intent and state of mind as hearsay. But the argument is sound, and you'll win a directions hearing that you could introduce all of that stuff. So you could introduce Dr. Steve Pachenik, Israel did 9/11. You could have the former head of the Psychological Warfare Operations Department appear as an expert witness, expert opinion evidence. If he won't come, you can use what already he's produced. And I'm just giving that as an example. So you could then introduce all of this material, because truth is not at heart. The truth of that material, it's intent. So what it is the reasonable person test. So if Jonathan Azaziza ever stood and fought, and I guarantee you they won't touch him if he publicly said this is what he was going to do. If he publicly stood and fought, he could feed into the court trial process, all the paperwork necessary to show my intent. I was a little bit angry when I wrote that music. I was upset at all the dead kids. That was not my intent to incite. What I wanted, I'm a political analyst, I'm a political person. What I wanted was an end to the regime. And also, here's the background for the jury so they can ascertain my intent and state of mind. Here's the material I'm taking in. Okay, so now that you see the material, now the truth or non-truth of the material is not at heart, so it's not inadmissible in terms of its hearsay. It's not hearsay. What they're ascertaining is the reasonable person test, that a reasonable person on taking in this information may well lose their temper and get very emotional. But their intent is not an irrational hatred of Jewish people. Their intent was to promote knowledge of the incredible criminality and outright psychotic behavior of the Israeli state, and the fact that the vast majority of Jewish communities around the world are tagging right along with it. That is the approach you take in the court. It is a winner, and I hope one day some of these people, these experts, these revisionists might actually ask me a few questions on it. I doubt it's ever going to happen.
Well, that's why we put this on the record, so then eventually people can see it, and it actually could plant a seed for people later to where they might actually start asking more questions instead of acting like they're experts on different aspects of revisionist history and whatnot, where, it's nice to look back at the different events of history. You and I have talked about how there's the Hitler worship or the Putin worship, and a lot of them are these expert revisionists that want to dissect World War II. And I think that we need to start focusing in on the now, to where the now is the Israeli domination of the high-tech sector and the Israeli supremacist mindset of religious and race, as far as a lot of them also believe in their own holy books. It states that when their Messiah comes in their holy book, that they were entitled to such and such amount of goyim slaves, Gentile slaves, to where, this is, even if you're not a Zionist per se, it's still in your holy book. So if you're a believer in Judaism, this is what your holy books talk about.
Well, even the Old Testament says, you are a lion's cub, O Judah. Your hand is on the neck of your enemy, O Judah. The scepter meaning earthly rule. The scepter shall not depart from Judah until the obedience of the nations is his. It says you will lend to many nations and borrow to none. That's in the Old Testament. And by the way, slaughter everyone you find. That's in the good book, the Old Testament, the Jewish Tanakh. So, which everyone says is the Christian Bible. Well, it's half of the Christian Bible, but it's matched masculine, feminine, the unholy, horrible, uncompassionate application of the law with the feminine mercy and compassion. And that's the balance, masculine, feminine.
Well, hey, that's why it's called a Bible.
Whoa.
Bi meaning two.
Well, the LGBT community should get into it too. Then, in that case,
but well, that's another thing there, Brendon, with the LGBT community, the LGBTQP B, whatever the hell other letter they're going to add.
Get your acronyms right.
The rainbow itself is something that people really need to look at, and it ties into the 7 Noahide laws. That is a symbol for the Noahide laws, and in America, they passed a bill on a sneak tip, kind of attaching it to other bills, and it was hidden, tucked away during Poppy Bush's administration, I believe in 1991 or 2, right before he ended his term, before Clinton took over. He did pass a bill to implement the 7 Noahide laws in America, and I believe that is the goal for the rest of the earth, while the Ashkenazi, the upper caste system, the Kohanim, I believe they're called. And you also have the Levites, who are just below the Kohanim, which they have a caste system in Israel. People are aware of the Sephardi, and then there's the Mizrahim. And a lot of people think, as far as the caste system goes, the Sephardi don't have much power and they're being discriminated, but a lot of these Sephardim are the ones that are running Latin America and other areas where they're considered cryptos. And you also had Obadiah Yosef, Bibi's friend, who had basically stated that the Goyim their main purpose is to serve the Jews.
Not their main purpose, their only purpose.
Their only purpose, absolutely.
Yeah, well, see, now imagine getting this material, which I was trying to do at my trial. I'd taken huge risks. I had gotten this to a trial. Give me some credit, people. And I've got Rabbi David Freilich of the Orthodox Community of Perth on via video link from Jerusalem, via the Israeli Supreme Court building, replete with all-seeing eye on pyramid. And I've got the Professor of Jewish Studies from Monash University, Professor Andrew Marcus, on the stand. That's a very interesting transcript, which you can get online at my just Google isolate but preserve legal paperwork. Now, they would not let me present material to the jury. So the jury naturally goes, well, this guy must be a nut. I mean, he's saying these things on the stand, but I haven't seen that on Seinfeld. Seinfeld never told me about that. I mean, I haven't seen that on the Channel 9 News. This wasn't on MTV. What's going on? So I never had an opportunity to present this material. No, they wouldn't let me present everything, even though I had the argument correct. And without going into all the details of the trial, where they did every dirty, filthy trick in the book, it was absurd. If you are able, and I have all the legal arguments down pat with precedent, that you can have a hearing, you don't wait for trial, you have a directions hearing on the presentation of evidence. That is inadmissible hearsay evidence normally, which then comes under the legislation itself, intent. So imagine getting all that material. Imagine if Jonathan, I'm not saying he probably should run, but if someone in Canada, I think a Tony Hall or a Kevin Barrett is perfect. I think we should encourage Kevin Barrett to actually provoke them and go to Canada and get arrested and go to trial. And we'll have all the material ready and a bunch of expert witnesses to appear on his behalf, including Michael Hoffman, including E. Michael Jones, including, we could have a whole list of people. And we could actually get all this material on the record with the argument this is about intent, that your intent is not any, it's based on this premise. Here's the premise of all the legislation they're putting forward to race hate laws, which are really all about Jews. It's not about anyone else. It's all about Jews. They say It's about an irrational hatred of Jewish people, number one. And two, it is directly related to 1930s when National Socialist legislation was introduced to remove Jews from all positions of power and influence and isolate them out of the community. That is why the legislation has been presented. So all you have to do is show, no, this is not an irrational hatred. This is a criminal investigation of a criminal group who are operating with the vast support of the majority of organized Jews worldwide. The vast majority are supporting this, minus maybe 20%. So you can argue this in a court, no problem. In fact, you will win hands down so much, they won't even prosecute anyone. They'll be terrified. Here's how you win.
That would be great. That would be perfect. That's where we need to take the edge away from them.
Well, get me to the High Court as well. But see, they're in a double bind because they know I'll crow. I will crow like a rooster. I'll be cock-a-doodle-doo on that rock, flapping my wings, because without doubt I would win the High Court case, without question. It would have to have political interference. But they know what I'll get compensated $400,000. Well, what do you think I'll be doing with that? Retiring? Man, I'll be financing serious. I will be going to end the Israeli state. There's no two-state solution. Everyone knows there's no two-state solution.
Exactly.
There's one state, Palestine, with the capital Jerusalem, administered by the majority Muslim population of the region, who will live in peace, administer the holy sites, and Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and atheists, and communists, and Buddhists, the Baha'i, can come in peace to visit the Holy Land, be amongst the olive groves, and live in peace. That is possible, but not with the Hasidim, the ultra-Orthodox, and even the Orthodox. The Sikh, the Babylonian Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, the books of the Zohar, are terrorist hate literature, they're terrorist handbooks, no more, no less, and it's time we got in their face.
Absolutely. Now, I've even seen in a recent article where people who are actively speaking out against the 1%, the 1% that dominate the world. And then a recent article stated that when you're attacking the 1%, you're actually attacking 42% of the Jewish community, international Jewish community. So basically they're admitting that at least 42% of Jews are in the top 1% of income earners and top levels of government and power throughout the world.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Find an archive, find a public library, find a government library, find anywhere there's an archive, paper, data, there they are, every time.
Yeah, and what you need to do is start utilizing the information that's coming directly from the horse's mouths. Like you and I spoke last night about Pechenik, the top-level psychological operations Israeli who has come out on the record and stated that Israel and a lot of these neocon and dual citizen neocons in America were behind 9/11, and he pointed out the names and all the different aspects of what how they were involved. And you stated that he even called out Sandy Hook as a psychological operation.
He did, absolutely, 100%.
That's crazy. So right then and there, I mean, you can utilize these figureheads who are experts in psychological operations as character witnesses per se, or examples to put information on the record.
Yeah, well, there's too many cowards, Nick. I mean, look at what's his name? PK Truth. Everyone goes, oh, someone said he's a hero. He's just like you. And I went, what? I mean, it's a joke, but he has 10,000 subscribers. And when he was visited by the police and said he'd been charged in the magistrate's court, which is like a misdemeanor, I said, listen, dude, I even put a little video up, some legal advice for PK Truth. You have the opportunity to say, look, I apologize, I went too far, but plead not guilty to the charge and go to a jury trial in the magistrate's court. You can do that. And then I said, you can present all this evidence to show that you're not insane, you don't need a psychiatric examination, that even the former head of the psychological warfare department agrees with you. These are false flags, that there are crisis actors. And you could present that to a jury. I mean, what an opportunity in the misdemeanor poxy magistrate's court. And you know what he did?
Absolutely.
Like nothing. Because they're all cowards.
And he actually shut his channel down, so those 10,000 whatever subscribers are no more because he shut all of
Yeah,
his material down.
well, there you go.
So
Just
he's
cowards.
doing nothing.
Just cowards. I don't know. I'm not saying he's got kiddie porn on his computer, but a lot of these people, the police turn up, their legs go to jelly, they urinate on themselves. Usually they're big, tough armchair generals at first. A raid to me now is like boring. Like, when's this over? I've got stuff to do. Being strip searched and thrown into cells, and it's like it's just nothing to me now. I would love the opportunity to stir the pot and get back in people's faces and say, let's get it on, bitch, let's go to trial. But if we could get an academic like a Dr. Kevin Barrett, like an E. Michael Jones, if we could get them to go into the court and deliberately provoke in the public interest, I mean, wow, we need to adopt these strategies. This is war. Why are these people talking about World War Three? Oh, it's World War Three, but you don't behave like it's World War Three. It's like it's a social networking event.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As if they're hoping for it or something. And that type of energy and that mentality, a lot of the consciousness and that energy you're putting out, it could actually happen if you're that's all you're focusing in on. If you're in that mode of sense of urgency, there should be more actually taking place, more
Yeah,
action,
absolutely.
more channeling the energy to things that are more constructive. Now, we were talking about the international crime network of international Jewry, and I just went on to the Habab Lubavitch website, and I found it interesting that the word Lubavitch actually means the city of brotherly love, and it was founded in a city in White Russia, which was at one point a territory of Lithuania. Actually, I think it's Belarus where the first actual Shabbat house actually opened up. But the city of brotherly love, that's another name for Philadelphia. And it just brought me back to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, how that's always been a outpost or another city state that the Jewish mafia took over, the Russian Jews, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, back in your Rothstein days, and then later Meyer Lansky. So I watched that TV show called Boardwalk Empire, and they were actually speaking a lot of truths. One of the mafia boss of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, at one of the ending episodes of the season one, I believe, him and his wife were out on the balcony, and they were, just talking about the stupid goyim and how they celebrate these festivals like New Year's Eve, and shooting off fireworks and spending all that money on fireworks. And these goyim just have silly different practices and ways of celebrating. And they actually use the term goyim. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, or maybe shiksa. But they're yeah. Look, I don't
Speaking
want
of shiksa, yeah, real quick, Christopher Bolin, when I interviewed him, he had just went to some Brooklyn where he did a live presentation in a Brooklyn bookstore of some sort, and they did an article piece on him and talking about how he's a white supremacist and a Nazi for covering the Jewish involvement in the 9/11 attacks and the war on terror, and how it was all done and concocted by Israel. And his name, when he was actually married to a former IDF soldier, when he lived in Israel with her at his grandmother's house, at her grandmother's house, he would get insulted, and he would constantly be called the male version of a shiksa. I forgot the name of it. Yeah.
Yeah, look,
So he wasn't respected.
there is some intrigue with Bolan to a point, but I think his work is so profound and so well done. And he obviously had a lot of help. He's just taken a lot of other people's stuff and put it together in a package. And good for him. He's probably he's the main guy. He is the guy. And I hope he will integrate in, really soon, certainly within a few months or 6 months, this Telpiot knowledge. He's already touched on MITRE, which was an Israeli company
Yeah.
intimately involved with 9/11 without question. I'm sure there's many more. Variant, which do all the data intercepts for DEA police, including the state and federal police in Australia. Promise Software, which is worth a documentary. I mean, if we ever get a chance to settle in, Nick, I'd love to do a documentary on Promise. That's a 2 hour doco right there. PROMIS, which is software databases for the law enforcement, which was stolen off an American couple and taken to Israel. All of these Israeli companies and the high technology sector is vital into understanding their power and how they can target, blackmail, bribe, and of course control databases, gain information on people, control, as we said, kill switches, cause trains not to run, electricity grids and all sorts of problems, infect hardware, software. The Stuxnet virus, I mean, there you go, that's a classic. How they infected millions and millions of USBs and thumb drives, knowing one day someone from Iran was going to plug one into Siemens controller units.
Yep.
The levels they will go to are incredible. They've got the core infrastructure, and that's why it's so important. So if Christopher Boleyn will integrate that into his excellent presentations and even get some good video editing with some really professional graphics and some good professional editing with long versions and short versions, maybe get a couple of chicks with large brown eyes to do some presentations. Sorry, but sex sells. I mean, there's a whole, advertising and marketing. You've got to get creative. And Brother Nathaniel Kapner does a very good job in his 3 to 5 minute videos. And we, at some stage, need to get our information into a really good, solid package. We need a Leanne McAdoo. We need a crazy Alex Jones, but we need them to talk about the right things.
Absolutely.
I'll be Leanne McAdoo if you want. You can be Alex Jones.
So yeah, these companies that you referred to that were involved with 9/11, they were little known startups that were started up by Unit 8200, like Converse and Nice, and there's another one that
Converse
was
is huge. I mean, the Amdocs Converse. I mean, they do all the
Amdocs,
billing, all the billing for all the biggest telcos around the world.
Yeah, and then the Stuxnet virus was also developed by Unit 8200 as well. God.
Yeah, so how did they get? Who owns the thumb drive factory? Guaranteed, same people. The hardware. Now you've got, I mean, the Intel chip fabrication factory. That should be worldwide news, known by everybody. So you have the top research and development CPU factory in the world. It's more advanced than the one in America. All the latest chips are designed there. This is incredible. And hardly anyone even knows about it. 2006 they built it there. Now they've hardware backdoored everything.
Yeah, instead of Intel inside, I like that logo Israel inside.
And they even brag about it. But that was a gift. I mean, from what I've been told, and some people made some comments, that most of the technicians there are Americans and they don't have a clue what they're doing and they're all incompetent anyway. And it's like, well, maybe to a point, but, with all those Russian technicians coming over them. I mean, imagine this. There's Russia, the enemy of America. Russia's building up, and there's all these Russians who aren't even Jewish running the high technology sector of Israel. Thanks for coming. I mean, this should be front page news in the papers. Front page, front and center. Who's going to admit to it? Well, obviously we have to do it.
Yeah, that excellent video you put together about Bibi and Putin control Trump, I believe the title was, and you showed different screenshots of articles showing that a lot of the Russians that have come over to Israel to migrate and integrate, well, actually, a lot of them aren't actually integrating, and a lot of them aren't even Jewish. They are
none of them.
Yeah. What you're saying is that they have, what you showed is that there's a separation of the Russian Christians or even the Russian Jews who don't even integrate and intermingle. They have their own separate societies per se.
And they don't even mix. A lot of Israelis say they're too scared to go into the Russian areas. So it's funny. At least the Russian Jews are very nationalistic, the ones that are actually Jewish. You give them credit. At least I've got a thing about the first Zionist bunny where they have the Israeli applicants for the Playboy model of the year thing, and there's this little Russian tart and her mother's going, they've all got PhDs in electrical engineering, and they even say that in the little documentary. And she's having a go at her daughter because they won't speak Hebrew. She's speaking in Russian. She says, "Why won't you speak in Russian? You should always remember where you come from. You come from Russia." So I mean, there's this even amongst the Jewish Russian community. They're so committed to Russia. And then you've got as there are dozens and dozens of articles showing that the vast majority of these people do not remotely qualify as Jewish in any way, shape, or form. In fact, many of them literally, if you have an electrical engineering degree, your father could be the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Christian Church, and you are in. They want white people in the country. They don't want these North African, Mizraim, Sephardic Arab Jews. They don't want Jews from Yemen. They want white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jews from Russia and Europe. That's what they really want. And if you've got an electrical engineering degree, you can take meth and party and take ecstasy in the nightclubs on the Tel Aviv beach. And that's why the Russians go there. They get their sunshine, and then they go back to Russia and take all the F-35 specifications, stealth bomber fighter specifications with them, the latest Intel technology. They take that back to Russia with them, and they are building up Russia, the supposed enemy of the United States. And quite frankly, in the grand scheme of things, you can say they are. They are a competitor for resources around the world, without question.
Hmm. And we've touched upon Gazprom and Rosneft. You sent me some information recently about Gazprom. What do you want to talk about Gazprom? I have some things that I want to add about Rosneft, so go ahead.
Well, Gazprom, it's very interesting, the gas fields. I don't want to get too complicated, but I might have to. Initially in 2013, this gets down to this Putin worship, when clearly Putin and Netanyahu in particular have got a deal going and have done for some considerable period of time, for at least 7 years, if not 10 to 15. What they're doing is Gazprom is developing the gas fields. Now, people will say, no, that's changed now. That's a lie. In 2013, they signed a 20-year contract to transport liquid natural gas via ship and the specific technologies that will be required to remove it. Now they claim, well, that's not on. Well, there's nothing to show that these contracts have been null and void. And what you have now is Delek, D-E-L-E-K, is the main Israeli contractor who owns 60%. There were two. They've now merged into one. The other 40% is Globe. Is it Globe, the American company, which has strong ties with the Trump administration?
Did you, in the email you sent me, you mentioned Noble Energy out of
Noble,
Texas?
sorry, I meant Noble Energy out of Texas. Thank you.
Welcome.
And it's quite clear, number one, they are lauding these gas fields, as they usually do, a miracle. And it's according to scripture. So the usual over-the-top dramatic garbage they spew forth. Those gas fields are a dud. The gas fields are in huge deep water. They're extremely difficult to get at. They're extremely expensive to run. They're running a very expensive top pipeline to Europe, which will provide less than 10% of European gas needs. The gas requirements out of there are 20 times less than what Russia is providing. And basically they are trying to rub out, as far as I'm concerned, Russia's pivotal role in setting up that entire project. Russia assisted Israel to set up that entire project, and there appeared to me to be some efforts to smooth that over and remove that. But when you've also got the Trump administration involvement in there, you've got it's the same old cast of characters popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the fact that the actual gas field itself is pretty poxy and dismal, and it appears to me that it's just a gift. A bunch of oil gas companies that come and said virtually, oh, we'll have a go, and a lot of them have walked out. Woodside went in, walked out, couldn't be bothered. It's like the Intel fabrication factory. It's totally artificial. They've just dumped it in there in the vain hope of creating some sort of viable socio-economic viability for this poxy little parasitic state called Israel. That's my opinion.
Now, in the article, you state that you sent to me, the Dutch company owned Scheerhever, the Dutch company owned by a Turkish-American businessman, they're saying is an Israeli natural gas company that hired us. But the FBI is not saying which company, and the Israeli media, which is covering this, is just saying an Israeli company. And then that's where the Isramco and Dalek come into, and Avno. And then Noble Energy is tied into the George Papadopoulos energy security advisor, and somebody from the Hudson Institute as well.
There's got to be Halliburton in there somewhere, surely. I don't know.
Oh, of course.
Some sort of support role.
Yeah. So with Gazprom, that is a nationalized natural gas company owned by Russia. When I looked
Putin's private energy company.
I'm sorry?
Putin's private energy company.
Right. So then when I looked into Rosneft, the petroleum side of things, a Putin-owned and controlled petroleum company, and what I found is that British Petroleum actually has stock into Rosneft. So if this is a nationalized company, how does British Petroleum have any ownership of Rosneft?
Well, and then, Sons of the City of London. Sons of the City of London. Netanyahu, Trump, Putin. It's the same Sons of the City of London, all coming from Dracula's castle every time.
You mean those Transylvanias, those
Oh yeah,
Nazis
the
that Alex
Transylvanian
Jones talked
Nazis,
about?
the Luciferian Transylvanian Nazis that are running the whole show. And of course, let's throw Rouhani in there as well, and the Rasvanjani crowd. Now, more sons of the City of London.
Yeah. And we were talking about the MEK last night with
Mm.
our buddy from the UK last night. So there's more information that we're going to cover on future shows that we just need to kind of outline and have it more presentable. And another thing that I noticed with Rosneft and Gazprom is that the most recent FBI director that Trump has nominated, I think his name is Christopher Cray, and that's Kray. He represented Rosneft and Gazprom from his law firm. So there's nice another nice connection. Not only did you have Michael Flynn, who sat and had dinner with Putin for the RT dinner gathering,
Oh, there's no
you
connect.
also have
He's got no connection with any of this Russian stuff, man.
yeah,
It's all perfectly normal. Nothing to see here. It's all, as Alex
Rex
Jones says, it's all a setup, man. It's empty.
Rex Tillerson, Russian Man of the Year, I think in 2015, and then you have the what was he gonna say? Oh man, there was Paul Manafort. That's who I
Yeah,
was going to
it
bring up.
goes on and on.
I was covering Paul Manafort before anybody because when I was looking into Donald Trump's nefarious connections before he was even nominated as the Republican nominee, before he defeated Hillary Clinton, I was looking into Roy Cohn, the nefarious lawyer who worked with McCarthy for the anti-communist hearings, and who actually derailed McCarthy for actually accomplishing things. And then Roy Cohn eventually became involved with these different sex operations that the CIA and Mossad are known for by compromising people with having them on videotape and compromising positions by having deviant sex with whatever, children obviously as well. And then it got into the meetings with how Roy Cohn got to know Roger Stone, and Donald Trump uh, became friends with Roger Stone, like in the late 70s, to uplift Reagan and support Reagan, I believe, in the New York districts. So Roger Stone had a BMSK lobbying firm, and Paul Manafort was a part of that lobbying firm. He is the M in the BMSK lobby firm, one of the most notorious lobbying firms known in recent history. Well, Manafort actually was hired by Yanukovych to be, and he was actually doing more work than just with Yanukovych over in the Ukraine. He actually was the PR director and lobbyist for Yanukovych. Paul Manafort was, and basically, in a nutshell, Yanukovych being pro-Putin. So then there's that deep connection there with the pro-Putin with Paul Manafort. Roger Stone, of course, he's being investigated as well with this Russian angle that a lot of people are trying to dismiss there, Brendan.
Yeah, look, it's yeah, you could talk for we could talk for 2 hours just on that stuff alone, and yet there's Jones and the gang and stay. Oh, there's nothing to see here. It's empty. There's nothing to see here. It is. I mean, it's just almost. Have they done it deliberately? They haven't even been careful. It's almost like I'm trying to look for some trick in it all because they've just brazenly walked into it without a care in the world. It's too bizarre. So. I just, it's beyond me that people, well, I guess that's the role of Alex Jones in the alt media, and so many others who continue to support Trump and Steve Bannon and the whole thing. I mean, it appears to me to be a very reasonably well crafted propaganda campaign, and the Jewish Bolshevik Talmudists are the experts at it, the experts of long-range planning, as Anatoly Golitsyn in New Lies for Old will state. They'll wait 50
Right.
years, they'll wait for a whole generation, they'll wait for 3 generations to die so they forget, and then they'll start it up again. And the red flags against Putin and everyone I ignored for 2 years. You just can't ignore it any longer, and you cannot ignore. And that goes for Syria Girl and a whole host of fairly, large players with big audiences who are brushing over this clear Putin Netanyahu connect. It's not a connection. They are married. They are making sweet love in their gay bungalow. All right, it's literally they are existing off each other. And now you have, of course, Putin. Bloomberg are doing documentaries where you have this vast technology parks in Russia now, which are half empty. And Christopher John Birkin has made a very good comment, although his the white race must take over the world comments were so ludicrous. I'm wondering about him, but he did make a good comment that perhaps there's going to be a rise of anti-Semitism in the United States manufactured by BB, manufactured by that same group, the Sons of the City of London, to promote an evacuation of the best and brightest of American Jews out of America and into Russia and perhaps Israel. But I don't even know if that'll work, because they're not going to go there. They'll come to Australia. That's where they'll probably go. But it's an interesting point. But certainly a rise in anti-Semitism is on the card. So that's why American Jews want to be very careful about the fact that the Jewish neocon Likudniks are bad for Jews. They are bad for Jewish communities all over the world, and they have to wake up to this Talmud crap, and they have to stop pretending. They have to stop going after Jonathan Azaziza and realize that the anger we all feel is perfectly justified, and they should be assisting us, and that includes assisting us. And just for the record, and I'm sure you'll agree, it was Jews who were feeding me a lot of information originally. They were under a lot of pressure to come out. If they come out, as you said, we'll get murdered. Brendan,
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a Jew that goes by the name of Jeremy. That's his name, Roth Kushel, who's been a regular on the False Flag Weekly News with Kevin Barrett. He does a show with Greg McCarran called The Antidote. Please check them out. And I would say that Jeremy has been a valuable asset. He's a purveyor of your information, Brendan, of Talpiot, and he's discussing Unit 8200. And he actually was at this left forum, and he was covering Unit 8200 and not Rosneft, but Talpiot, and talking about how these companies were involved in the 9/11 attacks.
Well, that's a big thing. See, I don't care about his Jewishness, real or not. I care about his fruits, and if he's putting those fruits out, then look, if I ever get settled and we can get together, we need our own circle jerks. Sorry to be gross, but they've got their circle jerks out there. We need our own. We need to support each other. Bobby, Hamza, Jason, who's trying to do some work in Western Australia. We need to start supporting these young guys, and supporting each other with links and cross promotion, and start to put this stuff out there, and stop with he's a crypto Jew, he's a Jew, there's a Jew, there's a Jew, there's a Jew, and just
everybody's a Jew.
Everybody's a Jew. The dog's a Jew, the grasshopper's a Jew. I mean, just look at their fruits. That's all I'm interested in. I mean, would I call Syria Girl a Jew? Well, what damage? And I'm just using her as an example with her high profile, and yet I have asked her and begged her, and she won't touch Talpiot. She won't touch the Israeli high technology sector, but she says how concerned she is about Syria. Well, it's time for people to wake up. And now she's in Russia, schmoozing the flesh, getting her orders, laughingly she claims, from Putin. Well, the actual fact, that's exactly what she's doing over there. Why are they promoting her? They're going to give her a script, and like a good little panda bear, a good little two-boot hussy, she's going to pout her little lips and cock her head in the Lady Di way, and put the camera up high so she looks submissive, and suck in these dumb males into her little parlor. And instead of using those techniques to foster the truth, she's going to sit there and plug how wonderful Putin is, I presume.
Yeah, and I would say that the Russian angle is another important angle to cover when it comes to the alternative right, a manufactured movement similar to the Ron Paul revolution, another engineered movement that kind of ties into what I've talked about with Cambridge Analytica, the Breitbart crowd, even InfoWars especially, how a lot of the discus comments and all the likes you do on Facebook and all these different websites are all being compiled to create a personal profile on you. It's all behavioral management and how they can manipulate people based off of the activity that they do on social media. And there's an article that just recently came out, how the alt-right and white nationalists in the U.S. were co-opted by the Russians. This came out by antimedia.org. I would recommend that you guys take a look at this article, but it does go into the different aspects of how Russian influence is what kind of evolved into the alt-right with Alexander Dugin, somebody that Christopher John Bjorkness is pretty, I guess, expert on as far as his nefarious agendas. And we've done some work over at Renegade Broadcasting when it comes to the alt-right. A lot of my shows have been about covering controlled opposition. And you've got Richard Spencer, who is one of the people who coined the term alt-right, and he is the CEO of National Policy Institute, who was given this rise to fame when he organized a conference over in Hungary, where the conference was actually banned from occurring, and you had Alexander Dugin, who was invited, who is supposedly in the ear of Putin with some type of influence that he might have, or vice versa. And then you have Richard Spencer's wife. She goes by the name of Nina Byzantina. That is her Twitter handle. She's actually been on I believe, RT, but she actually has translated books from Russian to English for Alexander Dugin. So that is Richard Spencer's wife, who is just arm's length away from Alexander Dugin. So there's this connection to the alt-right with Russian influence. So take a look at that article. I don't want to get more into it. That is a show within itself. And I wanted to point out that Paul Manafort, another couple things. Paul Manafort's company that his family has over in Connecticut. The connections go deep over in Connecticut with Donald Trump. You have Vince McMahon of WWF, WWE. You also have Paul Manafort. You have Roger Stone out of Connecticut. You have also Roy Cohn, who was out of Connecticut at one point. So you've got this deep state connection, plus you also have Yale University over in Connecticut. So with Paul Manafort's construction company, Family Business, they were given the bid to actually do the cleanup and rest of the demolition of some of the towers over in 9/11. That's an interesting connection right there for Paul Manafort and 9/11. And you also have Paul Manafort's construction company called Paul Manafort and Sons, I believe it's called, out of Connecticut, who were so nice that they offered their services to demolish and clean up the Adam Lanza house over in Sandy Hook.
They just like to help. Just like to help.
Yeah, they were just so generous to offer those services. So then they can save money and build a new high school or elementary school or whatever in the Sandy. I forget the name of the town. Newtown.
You sound cynical, Nick. Are you cynical?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you can even go on Manafort and Sons website. They've got a brochure of all the different jobs that they've completed and were awarded, and it'll show the 9/11 cleanup, and it'll show the Adam Lanza article that was.
It's another miracle, like an Intel chip fabrication factory being stuck in a war zone, and gas fields stuck in a war zone, and just these gifts just seem to appear, and that appears to be another one of those gifts of coincidences, as a divine providence maybe. But yeah, when you start looking, it's one connection after another, and I mean, we're trying not to be mentally ill here, and you try to keep your distance and have a good hard think about it, but it just doesn't end. It's like the same people.
Yeah, and what's up with Rosneft and Gazprom? They're supposed to be they have sanctions on Russia, don't they? So how does BP have ownership, some stock into Rosneft, and Gazprom and Rosneft are still engaging in American politics when you've got this nominated person who's going to be the FBI director probably, who represented them, and then you have the connection with Rosneft. They're starting to lift oil from Libya right now. So there's where the Libyan oil is going now. They're going to Rosneft.
Oh, look, and you know what? When you start to look into the oil and gas industry, it's fascinating. They're doing stuff everywhere. The Sudan, and you think I thought there was peak oil, my friend. There was no more oil. Remember, we're all running out of oil. There's no oil. We're doomed. And there's more oil than they can poke a stick at. But what was interesting too, there's another big company called Schlumberger, which is based in Norway, and they were doing a lot of sanction busting with Russia and Iran. And if people were to look deep, they might find out here in the heading from the London Guardian, it says where there is oil and gas. There is Schlumberger. Who's even heard of them? It's ubiquitous in fossil fuel operations across the world, has more staff than Google, turns over more than Goldman Sachs, and is worth more than McDonald's, yet you won't have heard of it. Meet the oil world's most secretive operator. And that's by James Ball, ironically, who was the guy that worked with Julian Assange originally. But it goes into some details about these shady, I was going to say little companies, which is so shady big companies that are operating. And I mean, there's even a fellow Jew, a fellow Polish Jew who's lived most of his life in America, but originally escaped to Israel or occupied Palestine and went to America. Mr. Grinberg, Grynberg. Grinberg, gas would have been cheaper if I found it. And he's had a go. He's a Colorado oil magnate. Jack Grinberg is suing Israel, charging Yitzhak Tshushiva was favoured because he is an insider. What he means, he's a neocon in bed with Netanyahu. And this guy says, I could have pulled that gas out at $2.50 a thermal unit, not $5.50 a thermal unit. And there's gross overpricing. It's expensive to get in the first place. It's incredibly deep dealing. It's a gift to Israel. It's not even really viable in the grand scheme of things. And then now they're trying to sell that gas to the Israeli state itself. And even Israelis are saying, no, it's too expensive. There's a huge hoo-ha going on about those gas fields. And the more you look, the more you find, the more intrigue you find, the more corruption you find. You go, where's it going to end? And now Netanyahu, of course, has said, well, we've got these gas fields. This is a prize. Now we need a navy. Now we need 3 more nuclear-capable submarines from Germany. And maybe that's an excuse. Maybe the excuse is we need a navy with nuclear-tipped missiles because we have these energy reserves. And I wonder if the whole thing, I don't want to dig too deep and get too convoluted and disappear up my own backside, but I wonder whether the whole reason for these gas fields, which aren't really that productive and aren't really that viable and can't compete with anyone besides being a gift of some sorts and something else to squabble over in the region, maybe it's just an excuse for Netanyahu's crew to buy more weapons and most of all get some nuclear-tipped highly combat capable German submarines. Just a theory.
Well, I looked into the German submarines that Israel recently acquired. I think they got 3 already, and then they have a few more on their way.
Yeah, 3 more.
That Germany gifted Israel like at least $500 million on the tab, to where they didn't have to pay at least $500 million of the total cost. So that was a nice gesture.
We're in the wrong religion. Sorry, crime group. We really are. I want a gift. I want a $500 million gift. How do you get in on this scam, man? I mean, I don't even think it's Jewish sometimes. It's just like they're all fighting amongst themselves. And it seems to me there's a group within the group here, these sons of the City of London. What's the one ring that binds them all? They've all got to be, I don't know. I don't know, dude. But there's something big going on, and Switzerland is a very viable hub for it. Swiss and German banking especially, they are just so deep in bed with the whole scam. There's a real scam going on.
Yeah, I was talking to John last night prior to us jumping on the call, and we were talking about Switzerland and the Knights Templars and how a lot of the documents that or artifacts that the Templars found, a lot of it was just planted, and then they just revealed a discovery later to show that Israelis, Jews have right to this land based off of these artifacts that were found. So a lot of fabrication of history to show ownership or existence at one point in this land. And we were also talking about the banking cartels and how the Knights Templars pretty much founded Switzerland. You look at the emblem of the flag of Switzerland, it's a Templar emblem. And you've got Basel, Switzerland, where the Bank of International Settlements
which is a huge one.
Controls all central banks, basically. So there you go. The banking cartel just went under a name of the Bank of International Settlements, and that's where the Knights Templar went. And another weird connection is the Swiss Guard, that are the Pope's elite force that guard the Vatican. So they're the Swiss Guard. So there's some interesting esoteric connections with that.
We're not going to start blaming the German Luciferian death cult, shape-shifting lizards, everyone. Don't panic. We will keep the focus on Israel and political Zionism and Jewish power. Don't panic. But there's something going on. One of the things I've noticed, and please no one get too angry, but have you ever noticed that the top people in this all seem to be quote-unquote white? I mean, even from Israel, the home of the Semites. All the leadership, all the top people are all these blonde-haired, blue-eyed Poles and Russians, it seems. I mean, Israel is so fractured along racial lines, it's not funny. That's why they'll never get rid of Hezbollah, and they'll certainly never get rid of Iran. They need it to scare the bejesus out of their own population. But it's filled with Filipino guest workers and guest workers from all over the world. They're promoting it as the gay capital of the world to say, look how inclusive and wonderful we all are. There's just something that's beyond the Jewishness that's going on here, and I don't know whether it's just the Jewish habit of, Jewish powers habit, sorry, organized Jewry's habit of morphing. They will literally shapeshift into whatever they feel is required to get past this current phase of the operation. But it's certainly camouflaging itself at the moment, the Israeli state, in a certain garb, and it's just that Switzerland appears. When I went to Iran, I noticed how heavy the influence of Swiss and German banks was there, and how that ISIS was largely being funded out of funds coming out of Switzerland. That I think all of their sons of the City of London have their bank accounts in Switzerland. It's probably said, look, if things go south, you've always got Switzerland to keep people on side, because Putin's in big
And
trouble.
there's Yeah, and there's a reason why Switzerland has always been neutral in all these world wars and all these different battles that have taken place in Europe. So, yeah, they're untouchable. And speaking of untouchable, there's a faction called the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, where every CIA director has been knighted into this order. And you even have Henry Kissinger and my or Bauer, the Rothschild, the original. He was Knight of Malta as well. So this isn't just a Catholic papal order. You've got people of all different ethnicities who have been involved in this order. It gives them diplomatic immunity from being prosecuted under crimes. You have your own passport. You get pretty much the ability to travel wherever you need to go. So you're able to be an operative and a diplomat at the same time.
Yeah, and you get a little special black credit card, which you can use with unlimited funds. I told you I knew a golfing instructor, and he told me this story. This was 20 years ago, and I just, yeah, whatever. But they said, you want to come to Switzerland? We're going for a trip. And he said, I don't have any money. No, 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 all expenses paid. And they literally said they just had this black, it had no markings on it whatsoever. It had the indent of numbers, but no identifying mark at all. And I always remember that. And yeah, how do we get in the club, dude?
Yeah, well, they're recognized by the United Nations as their own entity. They're like a country within a country, so they have their own coins, their own currency. They have their own passports.
Is it just
We got to be able to.
another subsidiary of the City of London, the old Rothschild gang?
Yeah, I would say so. Absolutely. And in Encyclopedia Judaica, it actually states that the Rothschilds are the guardians of the Vatican treasure. So that shows who's actually in charge of the purse of the Vatican Bank and whatnot.
Isn't it the black, green, or the green pope or something?
Well, you have the Black Pope, which is the Jesuit general, the Society of Jesus, and then the White Pope, the Pope Francis that we have, but I forget his real name, but out of Argentina, and I would say that he's been heavily influenced by Mossad and the CIA for quite a while now. They've had a lot of influence in Latin America since the 20s, I believe, when Argentina had a lot of children kidnapped and people killed. So, what direction do you want to go for the remainder of the show? There's other things that we can go after.
I think we've covered a reasonable amount, and I apologise to people that view this. I would love to make it with some flashy graphics and put, like when we mention someone, to put their name up, if you don't mind. I just got to pop it straight up as it is. I just don't have the time or the energy. I have to focus on paperwork for other things and work out where the hell I'm going next, and what I'm going to do. I guess that's about it. I just want to reiterate that that the worship, the lack of objectivity with Putin and Russia, Trump, Netanyahu, and Iran. Again, I'm not necessarily saying you should take an opposite viewpoint. It's just that it's focusing what will win. It's tactics, and there's such a lack of tactics. And let's face it, if I was a raving white supremacist Adolf Hitler lover, if I had two brain cells, I would not market myself that way.
Right.
I would get dreadlocks. I would wear a I love gay whales, and I would get up and say, "Hey, man, you know what I mean?" I would get smart. Isn't that the way you win wars? but it seems like they just want to put a big swastika on their head and run headfirst and say, free speech. Now, who's instructing these people? Are these people just stupid? Maybe they should get off the battlefield and let the grown-ups take over. There needs to be tactics. This needs to be applied in a military stratagem. That's what needs to happen. And so what I'm saying is we may not have a ship left if we don't all get together. And I mean the reasonably sane people, whether you're a white nationalist, a black nationalist, or just a nationalist in general, or whatever your take is, including members of the Jewish community. We may not have a ship to fight over in the next 10 years if we don't get together, solve this problem of Israel, Jewish power, and the central bankers. And you know what? After that, we'll all fight over the other issues. We'll fight over whether you want to create a white paradise in Idaho. We'll fight over whether you want to create a black paradise in Detroit, or whatever you want to do. We'll fight about that later. But for now, there must be some common sense unity. And anyone who comes and pushes disunity, wants to pitch Shia against Sunni, or Sunni against Shia, or black against white, or man against woman, or gay against straight, is your mortal freaking enemy. The only division there should be is calling out people who have had plenty of time to sit and think and get the message. You cannot continue to push Putin as the savior. You can't do it. You cannot push Trump as a savior. You can't do it. You cannot continue to just take this information in and say, oh, well, I don't really understand it. It's not my thing. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're a fucking traitor. If you've, excuse my French, if you've got 200,000 subscribers, 300,000 subscribers, if you're a Syria girl, and I'm just using her as an example, and you've got influence, you are a leader in the community, then you need to just leave the battlefield then if you can't get it, because this is a war. It's a real war. People are dying. There are 500,000 dead human beings. Another God knows how many psychologically traumatized, physically traumatized. There's 50,000 dead American soldiers, another 500,000 traumatized American soldiers. There's 3 million dead Iraqis. There's umpteen million dead Africans every year. Maybe we need a dose of suffering to wake us up, to focus. I've suffered. I got dragged out of my house. I lost count. They took all my computers. They humiliated me. They mocked me. They stuck me on the television. They put me in the media. They called me a racist. They called me a lunatic. They traumatized me. They possibly killed my sister. They killed probably anywhere from 3 to 5 people in my circle, highly probable. Locked me up for 3 years, booted and bashed me, and generally terrorized me. So I've got skin in the game, and I want to get the war over. I don't want a career out of this. I want to end any form of career out of this. Whatever happens biblically, if an asteroid hits, if we're all doomed, fine. But for now, Israel is the key. The City of London and the banking and financial sector is the key. Can we please stay focused on that and force the main players, including Iran, to start focusing on the issues that matter? That's my view.
Yeah, let's touch more on your video real quick before we end our discussion here. You were talking about Iran and the satellite for Press TV, and let's go into some of your interview. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Hamid Fadaroli, if you didn't know, was a senior international correspondent. I first met him in June of 2014 at the Gaza rally in Sydney. I was invited over by Brian Concannon, an activist over there. That's another story. And I met him there, and he said, "Oh, I know about your case. Do you want to do a thing?" And I was like really nervous, and I was still a mess. So I was out of jail. I was still. There was a lot of things going on. There wasn't just Israel. It was organized crime. It was corrupt police and prison officers.
Takes time to adjust, man. When I've been there, man, I was locked up for a year, not 3 years, but 1 year.
Well, yeah, and also just the death threats and police and prison officers and all sorts of stuff. Organized crime figures, major. Because I got in their face in the jail. Everyone going, this guy's a legend. I got in, the most feared people in the jail. I called them out. There's a bunch of gutless cowards, amongst other certain French words that start with F, end with K. And so I'm at the thing. I meet Hamid. I give him a copy of my synopsis. He comes back because his family are lawyers, and he goes, "Wow, this is incredible. We're going to do a documentary. This is amazing. I will stick by you. There's no problems, Brendon. Relax. I'm with you. We've got to get into this." And I was thinking, oh, fantastic. And I'll keep pushing for the High Court. Well, the High Court never eventuates. I'd get online and start doing some postings. Certain events happen. I'm harassed to hell. And Hammy says, "I'll stand by you, Brendon. Don't worry." I meet the ambassador from Iran at the consulate in Canberra, the capital of Australia. Hammy says, "They're not giving me any money, Brendon." He flies me to Sydney in 2015, Christmas Day, on his own coin, and we do a little interview. And he says, "Trust me, Brendon, I will get money for this. You will get a 20-minute segment like Gwyneth Todd. This is a big case." And he said, "You're one man against the world." Quote, not Julian Assange, you. He didn't say Julian Assange, but that's what he was meaning, because that's how they call Julian Assange. So this is pretty big, man. So as things drag on and I'm never getting released out of this bail and I come to eventually leave the country, come to Malaysia, Hamid was angry about Press TV at that stage. I get to Iran and I find they're just not interested in talking about Israel. I had to force them to do it. And with that in mind, Hamid on the first trip says to me, oh, and I said, this is strange, Hamid. It's he says, what were you expecting, Brendan? It's a third world country. And I said, okay. And he says, listen, he said that the Press TV was run by a bunch of, quote, tossers, which is a way of saying incompetent people in Australian slang. And then he also said that they were probably embezzling his funds. They weren't giving him any money for his projects. And he's a senior international correspondent. That's when I first left Iran the first time in disgust, and I was very diplomatic about it. People shouldn't think I just burn bridges. It usually takes a while for me to burn a bridge or a suitcase nuke it. And when I went back the second time when all that other crazy stuff happened, I was in the apartment. David T. Lashkari, the lawyer and interpreter, was there, and there were 3 members of the Persian Gulf Study Centre. One was Mr. Passport, a very nice guy. I liked him a lot. They were really cool guys. Their English wasn't very good. My Farsi was non-existent. And I asked a few questions like, why aren't we pushing Orthodox Judaism and exposing it? It's their number one weakness along with their high technology sector stuff. And Mr. Passport said something, and David Lashkari stuck his head down. He said, well, the reason they're not touching that issue is the last time Press TV touched it, they lost their satellite for 2 years. And I went, what? What do you mean? They lost their satellite? And he said, yeah, it's an Israeli satellite. And I went, what? What the hell is the Iranian state? Which is, I mean, Press TV is an Iranian intelligence outlet. What is the government state-approved number one TV station or Press TV doing hiring an Israeli satellite? Hello? Yeah. And he stuck his head was down like this. And then he said, and I said, who are these guys? You keep saying they've got no money. He said, how does Mr. Passport survive? See, I'm terrible. I'll probe. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I better be quiet. I'll just keep probing. Exactly. I don't care. I'll keep probing. I already said very nasty things to him. You wasted $2,000 of my money. Give me $2 fucking grand. I am leaving. I mean, it was visceral, man. Really bad. I'd had enough. And I said, how does Mr. Passport support himself? You keep saying they're an NGO with no money. And he said, oh, they work for the government. And I said, oh, so they're government analysts. They're intelligence analysts. And he went, yeah. Yes. Well, fancy that. So here's a bunch of intelligence analysts that want to spend all day slagging off the Gulf states and not going after Israel. That is God's truth. My Bible's over there. I'll stand it. I'll do this. No, I'm not going to do the sign of the cross, that crap. But, let my yes be yes and my no, no. Yeah. That is what happened. Okay, that is the bizarro world which I left. And it's time. I don't believe this would have happened under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the more conservative crowd. That reformist crowd, there is something wrong, and I believe they have done deal after deal with the Swiss and German banking crowd, and the Shia militias are running around the Middle East causing a lot of problems, and it's set up this freaking tit for tat. Blood has run. I don't know if Sunni and Shia can ever get back together again, particularly in Iraq. And God forbid that Iran has probably been promised a little empire of their own. In fact, they said to me they were going to get all the stands back, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and put them into an Iranian empire. They used the term empire. I went, Persian Empire again, eh? And he said, no, we don't say Persian Empire. It's the Iranian Empire. I went, oh, right. And I wanted to say, has anyone asked the Afghanis, the Pashtuns? I don't know if they're going to want to be a part of your government. I mean... Yeah. Why would you even say it was bizarre? But maybe it's not bizarre when you understand those linkages with Swiss German banking, City of London banking, and the Rothschilds. They've got everyone. Maybe that little turban that Rouhani puts on his head, he's not even a Muslim. Maybe he's a quasi-Talmudist communist Knights of Malta or something. If we look hard enough. I mean, they said he's best friends with Jack Straw and spent 6 years in Scotland. Maybe he's a Scottish Rite Freemason. How about that?
Yeah. I had a question that I didn't cover with you when I had done an interview with you a few months ago. James Packer from the Brett Ratner, James Packer, the Rat Pack. That's a Hollywood production company who've produced movies together, along with Steve Mnuchin from Dune Entertainment. They've merged and produced movies together. What do you know about James Packer?
I know a lot about James Packer. James Packer's the wimpy, lefty, slightly pathetic son of Kerry Packer. The Packer family are probably one of the most notorious and most famous media moguls in Australia ever, even more than Murdoch locally. Packer was the most powerful media mogul in the country for a long period of time. His father, Sir Frank Packer, was also a legend in the media world. When Kerry came along, he took a $600 million fortune and made it into the billions. And many speculate, in fact, I believe it's true, he worked with Jewish mafia don Abraham Saffron to bring heroin into the country in the late 70s
Mm.
and early 80s. My grandfather was best friends with Packer's personal pilot at this time, and he had a string of cattle stations, and all he ever wanted to know was, what are the roads like, what's the airstrips like, and they were running it in through their string of cattle stations. That's not necessarily so pretty well known in the region. The National Crime Authority labelled the code word goanna, and if you look at Kerry Packer, he looks like a goanna. Not the Didn't inherit the best looks from his family. And claimed he was involved in money laundering, drug trafficking, murder, gold bullion, and extortion, all sorts of things, which is all true. He was a very intimidating man. I knew someone who met him once in a lift, and this man said he was the most, his presence, he's a big man physically, and he said, "Oh, I'm in a lift with the little people." That's what Packer says, in a lift with people in suits he doesn't even know. That's such is his arrogance. He's notorious. He's notorious for his gambling. Packer then moved away from media and sold off the Nine Network to a company out of Liechtenstein. And this was also the media company that went after me the most viciously when I was first arrested and charged. In fact, they performed a gross act of criminal defamation upon myself, which they will get eventually a lawyer will get onto that. And we're talking a big payout there. So Packer is obviously an ASIO agent. He was sexually compromised, as was his father, by Abraham Saffron, who I've done a video on. If you look up
Hmm.
Trump is compromised by BB, 100%
Yeah.
pedo, you will see Abraham Saffron's role in compromising politicians, police commissioners, you name it.
He
Um,
reminds me of the Roy Cohn of the day
that's
that,
exactly what he is. Exactly
yeah,
what he is.
yeah.
Exactly what he is. So Packers also own all of the Crown casinos. They're obviously ASIO intelligence assets, literally ASIO intelligence assets. That's the Australian version of the CIA. If we were to look very closely, I bet I would find a hand of the Packer and Sir Frank Packer in the famous Nugent Hand banking scandal, the CIA bank that ended the reign of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, a socialist, rather some would say radical left-wing leaning politician. I sort of liked some of the stuff he had, but he was quite anti-American in many ways, wanted a more vigorous and local domestic and foreign policy, which is laughable. I mean, we were like 15 million people, as if we were going to have that, but that's what he was pushing. And when they cut off the money supply in terms of political plays in the early 70s, 73, he went to the Nugent Hand Bank, which was a heroin drug money laundering bank with strong ties to the CIA and Air America. This is the intriguing
Mm.
history of Australia, and in particular, if you look into Western Australia, you're going to find similar intriguing things going on. So Packer is now running all the casinos, of course, and he is literally an agent for ASIO and no doubt Israeli intelligence. So the similarities between Cohen and Saffron, and you will see Trump and the Packers, is very, very, very similar.
Yeah, and there's that connection with Trump, with the Packers, especially through Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs banker, Skull and Bones. Same with Steven Schwartzman of Blackstone Group, which is one of the largest investment firms in the world, Blackstone Group. Steven Schwartzman is former, Skull and Bones as well, CEO of Blackstone Group. But back to Packer, you've got the connection through Steve Mnuchin. And another thing that I found with James Packer is that not only was he engaged to be married with Mariah Carey, but she ended up leaving him allegedly because of his connection with Tom Cruise and Scientology. I don't know if you saw the Scientology connection there with James
Yeah,
Packer.
Packer's pretty. Look, I'm not going to denigrate someone I don't know. I've heard he's actually pretty soft-hearted, and his greatest disappointment to his father. His father was hard as nails, and young Packer was a bit of a wimp. Him and Murdoch's son. What's his Murdoch's son's name?
I
They're
forget.
both sort of lefty, save the polar bears, sort of leaning characters, not anywhere like their fathers. Um, Certainly there's been drug use and all sorts of things going on. I doubt he's a kiddie fiddler in any of that sort of sense. The Scientology, I don't know. I sort of like some of Tom Cruise movies. Oblivion was excellent, very anti Jewish power. Yeah, I agree. There's something very, very strange going on. Perhaps they've made a coming down off their drugs one night, they made a few admissions on the Scientology. What did they hold the polls or something? Maybe they made a few admissions about their past or something. I don't know.
Well, it
But
ties into what you were saying with a lot of the ancient Judaism ties in with UFO, kind of that angle there, and
it's all tied
Scientology
in,
also
all of it.
has that as well. The
If you,
Watchers, the
yeah, if you
Nephilim.
if you go deep enough, it's all Orthodox Judaism is pure UFO theology. The elite Orthodox Jews, the families that are some of the elite families, I'm telling you now, it's all UFO theology, all of it. Whether you're a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint Mormon, whether you're a lot of Christian sects, some of them Muslim, Sufi mystics, there's even Muslim groups, even communist groups, and certainly Freemasonry, 100%. It's UFO theology, and that ancient pharaonic Egypt with the ancient mathematics, with you see in, is it James Cameron or Ridley Scott? I think it's James Cameron, Covenant and Prometheus, the spin-offs of the Alien
Mm,
series sci-fi.
yeah.
The Nephilim, the giants that fell to earth and mated with the women. This is the Jewish Old Testament. Ezekiel on the banks of the Chebar River, and the great thunder and the dust and the amber glowing thing with the dome.
Ezekiel's will, and they
Ezekiel.
even say that the thunder and all the sound and light effects that was Yahweh talking to Moses on the Mount Sinai or whatever.
Yeah.
That was obviously some sort of UFO too, as well.
While it was, probably this from the shuttle Enterprise was landing, Scotty was jumping out with Captain Kirk. I don't know, but look, read it. You know what? The Old Testament finally made sense to me when I read it that way. The battle
Yeah,
that was in heaven. They had a battle in heaven. You know, the Cylons versus the humans or something. They crashed to Earth.
yeah,
So there's many things. Look, I don't get into it that much. I don't care, but I'm just telling you, it's what they believe, and they,
exactly.
with the talk of in Revelation, where John the Revelator is in his cave in Patmos, the island off the Turkish coast, and he has his visions, and he says that the New Jerusalem descends from the heavens and picks us up, takes up the 144,000.
Hmm.
Sounds like the Starship Enterprise.
Interesting that out of those 144,000, that the tribe of Dan is not included in that.
Didn't know that.
I wonder why that is. Yeah, I wonder why that is. So, Brendan, anything else that you want to touch upon? It's been a good discussion, man.
Well, we went very David Ickish then, didn't we? Lord have mercy. We better
Towards
stop
the end,
that.
yeah.
Let's just don't talking
Oh,
about the Germanic Luciferian death cults. Then we know we're in trouble. Or the
They're all part of the Vlad and the Impaler
yeah,
bloodline
the
there.
Transylvanians are running the whole show via Prince Charles and Jimmy Savile. But look, man, look, that's great. This is not going to be flash, but one day, if I can ever settle somewhere and we can do some work, we'll do some major damage. And like I said, we can all disagree. We can be. I'm actually a very civil person, but if you jerk me around, if you're going to just tell whoppers and behave like ridiculous, I will let you know. Give my regards to Jonathan if you hear from him. Obviously, I had some pretty nasty things to say. Maybe I was a bit nasty, but again, I can't tolerate this Iran worship. That's why I can never work with Jonathan. That's unfortunate. He's a rapper. He's popular culture. He could do a lot of damage, but that's the way that is, and that's the way it is. But
Yeah,
just because we
yeah.
dislike, or not even dislike, I don't wish him, dislike him personally. It's just his views, and you can still. We don't have to hate each other or say I can't speak to you because you talk to that one, and I can't speak to you
Hmm.
because we can just agree that there is an enemy and they need to be taken out and finished off. Otherwise, the whole planet is going to plunge potentially into a very highly technical dark age. That is possible, and we need to fight that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with Jonathan, if things work out and he's able to manage to leave Canada without having any issues, he'll eventually be in Chicago here with me. And you probably remember Naveed Converse, who put together a lot of the script for Missing Links with Mike Delaney. He did the first section of the documentary and did the voiceover in the first section of Missing Link. He lives in Chicago, and I do have Nancy here and her brother, Palestinian connections here. So I've got people here to actually put a dent into what needs to be done out here as far as street activism goes. There's going to be some activity out here pretty soon when everybody is able to collaborate. I don't really particularly like Converse or Naveed in a lot of his thinking. He's one of the Trump train worshipers, but at the same time, I'm still going to try to be in his ear and talk about the things that he needs to hear in order to jump off of that and think of himself as the one who needs to take action and not rely upon people like Trump to fix whatever needs to be fixed. So I'm willing to work with people like that on a basis where in real life we can actually do street activism. And I also see the possibility, if you are not able to reside in Malaysia, the potential possibility of you sneaking past the LA security and making it over to Chicago,
I
possibly
have to
to
do I
that.
have to do a Ken video, don't there, and go F the TSA. Maybe I'll get through then. I don't know. I think I might have to chop a few heads off or something, and then say Allah Akbar, and then work for Israeli intelligence. Maybe I'll get a free
Site
trip in then.
intelligence, you can work for Rita Katz and be in
Yeah.
one of those beheading videos.
Yeah, maybe I'll get in then, but you never know. Look, I mean, if push comes to shove and I have to go back to Australia, I may as well get deported. So I may as well very peacefully try and get. I mean, I'm a friend of the United States. I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I believe in the. I want to keep the United States, for all its sins, for all its faults, as a dominant power in the region, but free of this racial, religious supremacist nutcase cult, so that America can retain some of its former glory. It wasn't perfect, but it's the only president under Eisenhower who ever came out and said, beware the power of the military-industrial complex, one of the most incredible final speeches. And Kennedy, for all his faults and his deviancy, his incredible speeches that he's done. I mean, there's still a vestige of that incredible constitutional libertarian thinking in America, and I don't want to see that lost. I'm a friend of America. I mean, I would love to be in America. All the Americans tell me they want to leave and go to Australia. Well, I said, we'll swap, because you're where it's at, man. You're the last stand.
We still have our weapons, man, and that's a good thing. In the Constitution, we do have that right in certain articles that stipulate that if government is at that point of corruption, that the militia has every legal right to take these people to trial and take over the government again.
Yeah, well, God willing, that will be in conjunction with the good, because there's lots. And let's always remember that although the institutions are corrupt, and it's very frustrating, we're sick of it. And I hate the WA police, but I know I met so many good WA police. I've met good intelligence people. They do want to raise this issue. There's not enough horrible people in the world to really put their plans in action, which is why they're going to AI and robots, which is something we should raise, because even after this battle, the technology is so powerful now. We have got to get it back under control. And only, as far as I'm concerned, I think I'd love to see it peaceful, but I think people have to enter into the political process. But not just that, the US military at some stage, at this very critical stage, even though it's a dangerous thing, I think the coup d'etat has already happened. All the US military will be doing, and there's enough good people within the military to restore the American Constitution and start the trials happening of these people, the arrest and trial. And they will need the assistance of the militia. And I've said over and over, I have problems sometimes with America and some of the things America does, but remember, it has been infiltrated, it is infected, it's not America. So let's keep it on Israel, and God willing, if we deal with Israel, we can deal with America. And there can be a criminal prosecution. It's not a roundup, it's a criminal prosecution of lots and lots of different people. Some identify as Jewish, others identify as something else, but it's a criminal prosecution. And we can live in peace. And if biblically there has to be Armageddon at some stage, well, fine, but I'm going to fight, and I know you're going to fight to be a decent human being, imperfect but decent human being, and do our best.
And Christopher Bolin also states that as well, as far as 9/11 was never handled as a criminal investigation. So that's exactly how our politicians need to be treated as well, as far as what they do, their behaviors, their actions are criminal. So there needs to be a trial, just like for 9/11, it needs to be taken as a criminal event that took place against our nation, with high Israeli officials as well as Shabazz Goy here in America.
Absolutely, and Jewish communities are going to work out the world over that Israel is not a friend, and Israel is not a safe place for them. It is a place of death and a gathering, and it's being run by a bunch of people. I don't even think they're Jewish by any measure at all. So the Jews around the world will work out that Israel is the problem. It's their enemy, not their solution. I'm confident of that.
All right, Brendon. Good conversation, man.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate
Cheers.
it. All righty. Okay, cut.
Talk to you. Okay, so when do you want to record?
Go now. It's running.
All right. Oh, okay, excellent. All right, everybody, welcome. I am Nick Spero, and I am on the line here with Brendon OConnell. This is the first time that me myself have ever done a video recording type of interview, so this should be fun. We're going to get a lot of the bugs out of the system on future shows. Brendon OConnell and I, Nick Spero, intend on doing future shows together. And the work that Brendon has been doing and the work that I had done on Renegade Broadcasting, as well as years prior, I started doing radio podcasting back in 2008. I actually initiated a podcast called Black Sheep Radio, and my co-host was Jonathan Azaziah. Him and I go way back, and we're going to get into what's going on with him. We're going to get into Brendon's high court case, what's been going on recently, and kind of get you up to date on Brendon's status and what we can do to help Brendon as far as contacting the different administration officials over in, I believe, Perth or wherever it is that we need to. Brendon will direct any type of information that we need to know in order to contact these officials. We're going to talk about the need for more street activism. We're going to talk about the Russian angle with Rosneft and Gazprom. I was recently looking into Rosneft, and Brendon is on top of the Gazprom deals going on and the so-called sanctions on Iran or Russia. I apologize. We're also going to talk about Iran. Brendon just uploaded a recent video that we are going to discuss and kind of break down a little bit for you. You all had the opportunity to watch that before our show today, so we're just going to kind of summarize what that video is all about. So, like I said, I'm Nick Spero. I was a recent host on Renegade Broadcasting, and I got to thinking after interviewing Brendon, we didn't talk right after that. I was actually trolling Brendon for a while.
Function in California, which goes all the way back to 2005 and my work on the Collins class submarine and the procurement process for high technology contracts in Australia, and how they're all Israeli, they're backdoored, and the high technology sector that Israel is dominating right now. Now, this is such a huge matter. I'm the only person. There we go. It's doing it again. Sorry. Sorry about that, people. It keeps flicking back. I don't know why it won't stay full screen. But the matter, of course, I'm the only person on criminal charges to do with that high-profile case of offending Stanley Keyser and comments on a blog which were literally nothing, which is why the Jewish community then said he's threatened acts of violence and so on, which was all garbage. But the point was it was a very high-profile case. I got a lot of material on the record. I didn't do it perfectly. I was under extreme attack from every angle. My friends were under attack. There was a whole 18-month lead-up of intense harassment. So with that in mind, you'd think a lot of people would be. The revisionist movement aren't interested. I've written, as far as I'm concerned, the defining synopsis of the whole legislation to do with race hate. My case is the perfect case to push it forward. Revisionists don't even mention my name. We clearly have a angle of attack which we've discussed in terms of tactics, which is obviously correct. And trying to get people interested seems almost impossible, so I guess we'll have to do it ourselves. But my main priority, as long as hopefully we can continue to do these videos, but my main priority is survival and getting my case into the High Court. Now, I just had an interview with lawyer, an instructing solicitor who is absolutely dead keen to go ahead. However, he's not fully briefed on the matter, even though I've supplied all the paperwork. He should be very soon. But he has expressed fear. He says, "I'm quite fearful for my safety." That's a quote from Kevin Foley, instructing solicitor. I've been repeatedly asked again not to mention the Queen's Counsel, the high-level barrister or lawyer who will do the actual High Court appeal. He has said blatantly, "I will do it for nothing." Quote. His words were, "We can start with nothing. We'll worry about the money later." Now, the point is, this is ready to go. We're just in the final negotiations. It's been painful. It's been horrendous. It's been driving me insane. I'm trying to garner that this is so big. There's one thing for me to rant online, it's another to have High Court appeals barristers in the highest court of the land, mixing in certain circles that include the managerial class of this country and the United Kingdom and the United States. Okay, this is going to the highest levels. This is big. It's going to be put on paperwork, which means the Israeli state is going to be very busy. And I am trying to force the Department of Foreign Affairs via Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, the equivalent of the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, to publicly rebuke the Israeli state for interfering in my trial and interfering. It's the largest criminal contempt of court case and international incident in Australia's history. And you'd never know about it. There's no mainstream media interest. They refuse to name me. No one will talk about me. I've had replies from New Zealand politicians, heads of intelligence community. I've had ministers contact me, Joe Francis, and talk about my safety and how Minister Francis is scared for his own safety in Western Australia. That's Minister Joe Francis, and of course the Inspector of Counterterrorism, Barry Shelton, stating we all respect your work to do with the Israeli high technology contracts, the military contracts, and their domination of all key infrastructure throughout the world. So with that in mind, I hope in that short, brief opinion, which many people have heard 100 times before, people will put any personal don't like me ahead and realize that I will criticize you if you are incapable of understanding these simple tactics and this simple approach. That it is, number one, the twin pillars of approach, the exposing of Israel as a racist apartheid state with its foundation in Jewish, racial and religious supremacism, including Orthodox Judaism and the books of the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Zohar or Jewish mysticism. We can also include in there as well the Old Testament, which they quote from. That has a context as a Christian. That book has a context with me, but it's extremely dangerous as well because of the repeated requests to slaughter all men, women and children, which the IDF rabbis tell the troops to do as they go into battle. This is how religion, even if you're supposedly a secular Jew or a secular state, is infecting all levels of their society. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is the Israeli high technology contracts and their domination of all databases, their companies run under Israeli military intelligence, done under the Telpiot program from the 1970s on, and how they have now infiltrated completely the world's high technology sector, completely, and they are stealing all the American high technology out of DARPA via their SANM network, via their companies, via Michael Chertoff, dual national Israeli-American citizen and Homeland Security, and his private contractor spying on Americans. Then we have Rabbi Dov Zakheim and his former 2IC position at Booz Allen Hamilton, again subcontracting to the NSA. These are dual national Israeli-American citizens, and many of them are either crypto-Jewish or, in fact, American Jews who have served in the Israeli Defense Force, either done the Telpiot program itself, which is a very big program. They usually start their own companies. And then you have the normal run-of-the-mill Israeli military intelligence and lower-level staff that do 3-year courses in electronic data intercept programs, and they are now running around.
While about the Unit 8200 after I looked more into the Talpiot program, and I think that is an excellent angle to tackle when it comes to Israeli high technology. I've been covering that even before I knew Brendon, and that's why this team that we're putting together here makes perfect sense, because we're able to channel the information into the directions that it should go in a constructive way. So Brendon, it's good to actually be on the line with you. This is a time that we should have been doing this earlier, but we're here now. We've been talking and going over a lot of different things. So let's have you start off with your case in Australia, your status. Let's get into that real quick, and then we'll go into the other areas of conversation I brought up.
Hey Nick, so we've ironed out a few bugs, but I think there's many bugs to go. The current situation. First, let me address my behaviour at first. I think people need to know that I'm smiling, and I have I was always getting in trouble at school for smiling. I get in trouble, I smile. I'm about to die, I smile. How can I say this? How can I say I'm okay, but I'm in dire straits? I'm swimming, there's sharks. I can't juggle. There's only very limited things I can do. I'm under a lot of pressure. Finances are always a worry, not just getting enough finances, where I've managed quite well so far. It's the fact that the Australian government at any time could end any access to any money. So I've just got about 50,000 different things on my mind. I also find people constantly trying to divert me. I have to constantly repeat myself. I'm constantly getting inundated with garbage. I'm constantly finding people referring to my work and then talking about the white race ruling the world and trying to, in my opinion, associate my work with raving lunatics, trying to associate the case with raving lunatics. And I'm also having trouble articulating the case in general. The matter at the moment is my highest priority is not these videos, although I would love to do a show. My aim is the High Court. For me, the High Court of Australia is the pinnacle right now, whereby the matters of the case, including the interference of the Israeli state, which included the Israeli ambassador, Yuval Rotem, the Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister, Danny Ayalon, the Australian Foreign Minister, Stephen Smith, 35 local and federal members of parliament turned up for the Friends of Israel rally where they all attended, and 135 issued written statements of support. 2,000 people, 3,000 people attended, which would be the equivalent of 40,000 attending a similar in the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia and America, running around with their hacking techniques, and they're now working in your corporations. They're working in stealing your proprietary corporate knowledge, your various well, what do you call them? See my brain. What do you call it when you have a protection for your knowledge.
Patent.
Patents. They're stealing your patent technology, and they're opening up networks of corporations. They're literally weakening networks in your IT department in corporate and military sectors and government sectors to the Israeli state. This is so big, it is the largest, let's call it what it is. Israel is a Talmudic Jewish Bolshevik state founded by the same people who founded the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik Revolution, and they've done the same thing in the United States. You are totally infiltrated, and they are seeking the destruction of the United States and emptying out American manufacturing to China and India, and basically installing the high technology, the ability to have an administrative center in Israel to run the whole show. That's what they're doing, and that to me is the twin pillars which we have agreed we must go after. There you go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Unit 8200 is a concept that came from Talpiot per se. I know that after listening to an actual they did a PowerPoint presentation, this company called Our Crowd, which one of the founders actually came out of Unit 8200. And what they are is a venture capitalist company that recruits or invests into these tech startup companies. And the Our Crowd team did this PowerPoint presentation, and they talked about how a lot of this information started coming out more frequently about Unit 8200 because they wanted to utilize their prestige and the snazz and the flashiness of, or just to attract Israelis to go through the IDF. And the goal, the icing on the cake, would be if you got accepted into Unit 8200, where prior several, ever since the early 50s, when Unit 8200 was in operation and with American funding of technology to get them started, a lot of this information was hidden from the public. This was a very secretive group, the Unit 8200. And they're at the highest levels of the IDF, except for